and Hagmann report for today. It's Tuesday, March 18th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann with co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible 3-hour program. Hour number 2, of course, if it's Tuesday, it's Tuesdays with Stan Deo in hour number 2. So it's going to be a great segment there. First hour, we're going to get into some details about important news, what we should be paying attention to. And, of course, rounding out hour number 3, additional news, information, analysis, and your calls as well. For new listeners, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base on the Internet is HomelandSecurityUS.com. Folks, we're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tap into us at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us. Thank you for your deliberate intent to spend 3 hours with us. I hope you enjoyed last night's program. I just want to make a comment about that.
I got some good emails about last night's program.
I did too, and I got some pretty negative ones that are typical. When I say negative, I'm talking about the profane. But I got to tell you this. How we set this up, we kind of went through the back door because knowing the detractors, the people that don't want this information out, are pretty clever. So if you kind of followed our pattern, you would have never expected that guest to be on last night. Of course, I'm talking about Butter D. Zillion, the internet name Butter D. Zillion.
I never
about the Fuddy crash.
Expected the name like that. No, for purposes of anonymity, we did not obviously use the real name, but it was such an interesting show that I was playing part of it last night. The first hour, I went back and listened to part of the first hour, and in doing so, I actually learned more than I did while I was listening live.
And that usually happens. We do play the shows back, once or twice, and shows like that with a lot of technical information and a lot of reliance on images and YouTubes. And if you visit her blog, it's right on. You go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. I have not had a chance to update the website today at all. As a matter of fact, folks, you know what? It just does my heart good. I had the distinct honor, and I mean this in every sense of the word, honor, to be able to eulogize my mother-in-law this morning, who passed away. And of course, she was buried this morning.
Also, for the showings before the funeral, you put together a fantastic DVD. All these pictures of great memories with great Bible scriptures that you picked out for the different pictures and captions, and it was really well done.
The people at the funeral home appreciated the fact that I made the announcement that copies of the DVD would be available in the funeral home gift shop for $19.95 on their way out. Feel free to pick up a DVD. I'm just kidding, of course. I did say that to a couple of people in jest, of course. But it's a little bit of levity doesn't hurt when you're dealing in that type of environment. But folks, we got a lot of news and information to get to. Really, a lot of stuff. And things are happening. I'm still getting emails about my appearance on Coast on Saturday night. I think there's a lot of interest with respect to Ukraine, Crimea, what's really taking place there. And folks, Steve Quayle, and others have called it, of course, the intelligence insider called it long before. And, of course, that's saying after the Olympics, Putin was going to flex his muscles. And now we're talking, and all of this, please, you can't really talk about Ukraine and Crimea without talking about Syria. Now we find, Joe, you had let me know about this. Now we have got a Russian naval asset off the coast of Florida, correct?
Did you receive the email for the show?
I did.
Okay, yes. We have a article, Watch the Russians Off Florida's Coast. And this article here, it's actually on a few sites, but it starts off by saying, well, some mock the Russians for always deploying tugs with their Navy. I've grown to appreciate it as I've now observed them using tugs effectively, both soft power operations and now military operations like trapping the Ukrainian fleet. It goes on to say, so the question is, why have the Russians parked their premier Northern Fleet naval tug off the coast of Florida? As they have a map here, and it looks about less than 100 miles off the eastern seaboard of Florida. And why are they there? Well, we have varying theories, but the ship is observing the launch of Falcon 9 SpaceX CRS-3 scheduled for early Sunday morning from Cape Canaveral. That is the official narrative.
If I can just tell you why, what are we doing to Russia, Joe? I mean, seriously, what are we doing to Russia?
Well,
we're opening various fronts, correct?
Today there's news, Obama said he was going to sanction Russia. Well, Putin says, bring it on. And we have Putin signing, this is a very long article, Putin signed this is a timeline here, a treaty to annex Crimea as Ukraine's authorities' use of force. There was 2 soldiers killed in a base attack just recently today. The Ukrainian Prime Minister called the shooting a war crime and says that the Ukrainians now have the authority to use weapons as self-defense or weapons in their dealings with the Russians. Almost a declaration of war. Well,
this is a declaration of war, at least for us spectators of the people.
Yes, it is. And the troublesome increase of what appear to be hostilities is something we need to pay attention to. We also have an article, The Media War, the Battle for Crimea, that is important. We need to get into it. And I had a friend of the show and listener came in from out of town today, and we got to go out to lunch, and we had a nice time, and we were talking about some of these things, and he made a comment saying, between Ukraine and the Malaysian flight, I'm just so busy looking into these stories that the more I look into it, the more confused I am. I can't figure this out, and it's so frustrating. And as I was thinking, the whole plane of the Malaysia 370, the 777 plane that disappeared, I think it's on its 10th day, 11th day of being gone, definitely landed. I believe that the passports, stolen passports with the Iranian teenagers who used them were a diversion to make it seem like if they wanted to, they could sell the terrorist angle. Who can't find a 777 after 11 days? If it crashed, there would be evidence. If they wanted us to believe it crashed, they would have taken a junk plane, broken it apart, and threw it in the ocean and said, here's the wreckage. But we have nothing.
The more I look at this, and I apologize for not really being as astute with this, the more I look at this, the more I realize that we will see more of this or hear more of this in a very bad way. I do believe, but this is part of something much bigger. But let's get back to, we were talking about Russia and the United States and what's going on there, and Russian naval assets off the Florida coast. Well, what's that all about?
Yeah,
and I responded, just let me say this. I responded that we are stretching Russia out in terms of making them opening different fronts. Well, some by proxy, some directly. Well, if you've got a naval asset anywhere, it's going to require surveillance by our naval asset as well. So what Putin is doing is spreading out our military. Well, why would he do that? Folks, study history. We cannot be everywhere all at once, being the world's policeman for the petrodollar, something's got to give, and something will give.
Well, if we assume the role of the world's policeman, doesn't that kind of entail patrolling the world, no matter what's happening and when it's happening?
But you can only do so much. I mean, so what we're looking at here is the intentional destruction of the U.S. dollar at the very core of everything that's going on. You see the IMF in Ukraine. You see puppet governments of the IMF in Ukraine. Of the global currency. Yeah, well, the IMF is that. And you see the turning over this because of, for financial reasons, for purchasing the future. It's about the future. And this is what this is all about. Because really what we're seeing is a tremendous game of, it's not a game, but we're seeing this tremendous play for the future.
How much are you worth?
I have no idea. How much do you want?
No, I just want to know what you're worth. Over 10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future.
There you have it. That's from the movie Chinatown. It's about the future. Folks, go back to a charter for American-Russia partnership and friendship. Go back to the charter that was signed or issued by the White House on June 17th, 1992. You can find it at fas.org or just search American-Russian partnership. This was signed by George Herbert Walker Bush, and this goes back to this International Peace and Security Treaty. The United States of America and the Russian Federation had reiterated their determination to build up this peace, one founded on twin pillars of political and economic freedom. The United States of America and the Russian Federation, according to this document, recognize the critical importance that democracy's success in Russia and other former Soviet republics can have on international peace and security. The United States of America and Russian Federation, proceeding from the basis of, get this now, mutual trust and respect, and a common commitment to democracy and economic freedom, and reaffirming Camp David Declaration of February 1992, the November 1990 Charter of Paris, the December 1991 March 1992. So what this is a reiteration and a confirmation of previous bilateral agreements between America and Russia. So if we look at this, if we understand that back in the early 90s that there was this financial partnership that was entered into, a charter for American-Russian partnership and friendship.
Yeah, which the Cold War
right.
really launched a peace, the mindset of having peace between the two nations, which is good, except when it's peace for the moment, peace for the political agenda to continue.
Well, correct. So looking at things now, does it make sense? Nothing makes sense, it seems like. For example, why is this particular administration so antagonistic toward Russia? And I'm not saying this in defense of Putin, nor am I saying this in an attempt to denigrate Obama or his people. But what I see taking place, and what a lot of others are seeing taking place, is at the highest of levels, there is an attempt to advance economic integration, meaning an attempt to a working process of establishing this global governance and global economy.
So you're saying that they want to strengthen relationships with other countries around the world. They want to strengthen peace using modern technology in new innovative approaches, enabling them to effectively carry out their strategic vision from the American public to the private sector companies, schools, civil societies, and volunteers. They are embracing this, what they call a competition for peace. And something I found in a bill that was passed and signed by the president in January 3rd of 2014. The act or the bill is called Memorial to Commemorate America's Commitment to International Service and Global Prosperity. And what it does is authorize the establishment of the Peace Corps Commemorative Foundation. Now, many people might not be familiar with this, as I was not until last night. And reading through some of their documents, their histories, their goal, this is a UN branch that has been given sovereignty, as this bill states, over Washington, D.C. And I'll read the first paragraph, which says, the Peace Corps may establish a work on federal land in the District of Columbia and its environs to commemorate the mission of the Peace Corps and the ideals which the Peace Corps was founded. Compliance with standards for Commemorative Works Act, the establishment will be in accordance with Chapter 89, Title 40 of the United States Code, known as Commemorative Works Act. They're going to use federal or taxpayer funds, and the responsibilities are going to be to establish a negotiation of peace and compliance to that peace.
Well, what you just referenced there, this going back to January 2014, is a global economic lineup, right? All countries, okay. So
NGOs.
What are we seeing? So why the war, or why this war footing? Why this antagonism in Russia, Ukraine, Crimea?
And I love that most of our audience is going to understand this, because they get their peace through war. They get their order out of chaos.
There we go. End of story. Now try to explain that to someone that really doesn't have the background that this audience has.
Yeah. Say they're going to establish peace through a world war. People will say, how do you even know anybody would be left after a world war, let alone to establish peace? Well, these people have been planning for millennium, and the people in power now are only carrying out agendas that were established since the foundation of nations.
And that's right. What we have to do is we have to look back or step backwards. We have to step back and look at the bigger picture here, because what we're seeing on a global scale, behind all of the illusions of war, and don't get me wrong, war could break out. One misstep, one misfire, one accidental discharge. I mean, there could be war. And if
look at Libya, Egypt, Iraq, I mean, all places we either overthrown dictators or engaged in war with troops on the ground, now to have retracted from the war, or other individuals and powers of those countries, now they've all deteriorated back to civil war.
Correct. And this is what really is setting the stage for the global economic and global governance and, well, this one world order that we're seeing. But people are stopping short of really looking at the bigger picture. What they're seeing is, okay, Crimea problems, Ukraine problems, Russia exerting the influence over these sovereign areas, or especially with Crimea, not understanding that this is all a stage play, that what we're seeing here is for our benefit. Now, there will be wars, there will be fighting taking place, but that's not the end game. You're correct, Joe, when you said order from chaos. But we are breeding this chaos. The West is breeding this chaos.
Exactly,
Who
and
knows this?
Obama is the perfect example of injecting chaos into the Russian-Ukrainian situation, as he has imposed sanctions and warned of further sanctions against Russia. And he says that he is quoting himself. He's saying, "This is the will of the Ukrainian people."
Judy McLeod had written a very good article here. Obama's tough talk is nothing more than a weak appeasement policy. It's called, the article is titled Spar Wars. Obviously a play on Star Wars.
And I bet a foundation of that all talk is the Red Line in Syria example.
Somewhat. You've got to kind of really understand the backdrop, but proletariat to Vladimir Putin, she writes, banning U.S. senators and officials from visiting Russia, including Senator Durbin, is a colossal waste of time. Obama bought and paid for senators and officials are far too busy working to bring down the United States of America to bother visiting Russia. And she's 100% correct. If it's a socialist state you dream for America, Obama has already done the job. Now, I haven't talked to Judy in probably, by phone in probably well over a week, but she understands this. Since 2008, U.S. senators and Obama officials have had their very own land of the czars, and the state of its health is getting more worrisome by day, she writes. Holding world, and this is key here, in my view, holding world attention. The spar wars between America and Russia is mostly garish window dressing. I love the way she writes.
That's well said, yeah.
Yeah, and we're not for, and she gets her jabs in, were it not for Obama's metrosexual signature, we could write off spar wars as boys will be boys. I get that.
Well, I found an interesting article here that it's not just the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. Turkey has a claim from a treaty, and this is very interesting. Under the Ottoman Empire, there was a treaty with Catherine the Great. If Crimea declares independence, it returns to Turkey. A Turkish newspaper yesterday reported the Autonomous Republic of Crimea announces its independence, then it falls under Turkish rule. This is being reported by Press UA or .ua with reference to Espresso TV. Based on what the author of the article wrote, this is confirmed by the agreement which was signed 230 years ago by the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire.
There are going to be claims like this. Obviously, you see Turkey turning away from NATO and going into Russia's arms, into the arms of Russia. And that's by design.
Yeah, and they just end with this. They said, however, one most important point is the clause that stipulates condition that the peninsula does not declare its independence, then it cannot be transferred to a third party. Otherwise, Crimea must automatically be returned to the under Turkish rule. Otherwise, they would have to officially declare the treaty null and void before anybody else makes any claims on this land. Now, I don't know if this will go anywhere. I assume it won't. But something interesting to think about. Well, you see the United States interjecting itself into all the world's ills while creating more than the world's share of ills just here in the United States. We have 230-year-old treaties that people are reporting on and claiming, ownership of the land. It's very interesting. And would you call it a doom distraction, or would you call it something to watch for, more so than a doom distraction?
Well, I think it's part of both. I think it's part of the magic act. I think it's part of the illusion. Look, what we did, for example, we have to go back well into the 19th or 20th century, to really understand the backdrop for all this. And, of course, that involves the fall of the Soviet Union and how we took down the Soviet Union. And, of course, part of that was the assault on the Soviet Union on the dollars, the rubles, that is, where we flooded the Soviet Union with rubles. Now, Putin was a KGB lieutenant colonel in the KGB at the time, and still is. I mean, they don't change their dictatorship stripes or thuggish stripes, whatever you want to call it. So look what happened. Look what the United States did. And, of course, we were exerting our influence, our power, our authority because, of course, the U.S. World Reserve currency. We could do that because, of course, we had the military to back our currency. And we had the currency to fund the military. You see how that works. It's a very intense, incestuous relationship. And now, one of the other things, too, I would urge people to download the article from American Thinker by Michael Reagan, Building on the Kernel of Truth. Folks, you've heard me say this before, but it's about time everyone does it. If you haven't done it already, go to American Thinker or search Building on the Kernel of Truth from the American Thinker and download that article. It was written right after Benghazi. that gives you a lot of clues in there as to what's taking place, what's going on with Russia. The bottom line here, folks, is we have got the New World Order, the Council, or the Committee of 300, but the core group of players funding all sides of all conflicts we're seeing taking place right before us. What they're allowing to happen, of course, are these mob wars take place between Russia and the United States and through proxy nation states. This is exactly what we saw. Well, we've been seeing this really for the better part of the last 100 years or longer. Think about David Rockefeller, for example. When the Soviet Union fell, however you want to describe that, however you want to describe that, what did Rockefeller do? Well, he went to the Soviet Union at that time, or Russia, whatever you want to call that, to his vacation home. And he set up shop there. What does that mean? Well, you're looking at the funding, the creation, this huge game of world risk that's being played, yet people are dying. Their wars are being fought. Just go forward in time a little bit to Somalia or to Bosnia. Things are taking place. People are, in fact, dying because of Western. When I say Western, I'm talking about the U.S., the UK, France, Israel, and even Saudi Arabia. Everything is being reshapen. The world is being reshapen. The balance of power is going from the west to the east. And as much as it looks like we are fighting for the existence of the petrodollar, of the U.S. dollar, and to some extent we are, it would be like polishing the Titanic. You're making the dollar look good, drawing more countries into the U.S. dollar, establishing the federal effects of the International Monetary Fund, this fiat currency. You're doing all of this, but for what purpose? To rob, pillage, and plunder countries of their wealth. You've got professionals that have been doing this for well over a century, longer than that. This is a banker's conflict.
Soros has to be at least 150.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
but they,
I mean, you know, yeah.
They pass on all their information on how they conduct their business, the means that they go about acquiring and disturbing what they need to disturb and acquire what they need to acquire. They pass that information down to their underlings, the ones that will be the future George Soroses. And what's the old saying about keeping money in the family? How people stay rich by keeping money in the family, something along those lines. Well, it's the same mentality. It's a mafia of Satanists who, as David Rockefeller says in his own book, are working against the best interest of the United States. And they are proud of it. And there's more to that quote than just that, but that sums it up.
Well, if I can use one example, folks, and I think that this is a pretty topical example. If you go back to January of 1980, and I do believe all of the answers to the questions that we have about the current events taking place today can be found in history, and in recent history, how things were modeled and shaped for what's taking place today. For example, Zbigniew Brzezinski, you go back to the Carter era. Well, go back to January of 1980. Brzezinski remember the Iranian hostage crisis. Brzezinski used that hostage crisis to promulgate the so-called Carter Doctrine on the Persian Gulf. Now, remember this? The January 1980 State of the Union address, where Brzezinski insisted against all objections on the inclusion of one critical passage that was given by Carter in that State of the Union address. Now listen to this. Then this came out of Carter's mouth. Let our position be absolutely clear. Any attempt by any outside force to gain control of the Persian Gulf region will be regarded as an assault on the vital interests of the United States of America, and such an assault will be repelled by any means necessary, including military force. Now, what was that all about? Folks, that was about oil. That was about the free flow, or the ability to assure the. Now, he was taken to task by many people during that period. Some said that, since it was a folly for him to actually make that statement and take the position, because he was actually throwing down the gauntlet to the Soviet Union in the most provocative way possible. What are we doing today? Is this not an extension of the Carter Doctrine? And if it is, who's behind it? Well, we have to look no further than Zbigniew Brzezinski. Well, now, today, however, don't we have Brzezinskis in the media that are actually protecting the flow of information and censoring and molding, perhaps, at least in my view? Of course.
You like his daughter?
Oh, perhaps, yeah, his daughter.
And another Rockefeller quote, we are grateful to the Washington Post and Washington Times for keeping our meetings in the dark, because if they were exposed to the bright lights of publicity, they would never have been able to be successful. Well,
exactly. But now think about that statement made in January of 1980. Did this so-called Carter Doctrine, which evolved from that one statement, really provided the basis for every action in the Persian Gulf region over the last, 50, well, I shouldn't say 50, over the last, since 1980. Even the first Gulf War, to knock Iraq out of Kuwait, and even the current Iraqi war. So, who set this up? Brzezinski, who essentially is the founder of the policy that's being carried out. Well, it was carried out by Bush Sr. in his capacity as the head of the CIA. George W. Bush, in the fact that he actually, and also Iraq, Bush Sr. as president, knocking Iraq out of Kuwait, and continuing on, or previous to that with the CIA, but also George W. Bush by attacking and occupying Iraq. So Brzezinski, if you look at this, look at that statement from 1980, look at what's taking place today. It's the same template, and in this case, the same player, that being Brzezinski. And don't forget, remember, folks, the Desert One situation? Remember, as the hostage crisis in Iran continued, the Carter administration attempted this pretty desperate military action, this rescue mission, and it went very badly. We lost helicopters. It was a bad PR thing with the country. It showed us as a weak nation. But what was behind that? This attempted rescue mission. Well, we see the fingerprints of Brzezinski as being the architect of that and other military or U.S. Military, U.S. I don't like to use the word imperialist, but at this point, nation building, I should say, in the Near and Middle East. This is what's taking place right now. Folks, we have to understand, and I believe this to be true based on all of the research I've conducted, we have to understand that what's taking place now, Obama is a figurehead to the extent that he was created. He's a creation of our intelligence agencies.
Created, trained, formed.
Right. And just look back at Obama, and some people will say, oh, Obama's the greatest president ever. And in fact, I had endured, I'll use the word endured, a number of days with somebody who just thinks Obama is the greatest. And I mean outwardly and aggressively. There's no middle ground. But is he not a creation of Western intelligence? You heard last night, for example, all of the chicanery, all of the mischief that surrounds Obama, from his birth certificate to the individual, as we spoke last night about the woman who was reportedly killed, allegedly killed, or believed to be dead, Loretta Fuddy, from the water landing. Isn't that suspicious? The only person, the gatekeeper for the birth certificate. So all of this to say, we don't really know with any degree of certainty the origins of Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro. And I believe, based on all the information, and this also relates to what's going on in Ukraine and Crimea, we have to look at him as being a Manchurian candidate of sorts, and maybe that's not the right phrase, but certainly a creation for this very moment in time. And if you look at, even going back, and we can just touch on this as well, the election of this past election, was there any real race? Was there really any type of election that took place? No, it was more of a going through the motions type thing. So what we've got right now, and even if Romney would have won, look at Romney. He was backed and continues to be backed by some of the most powerful globalists that exist.
Yeah, just on the other side of the spectrum. And I actually heard a MSNBC talking head mention the election of Romney and Obama, stating that Obama was probably cheated out of hundreds of thousands of votes through Republican voter fraud, which made me laugh. And I think we all know, the 100%, 110% of the population of the votes he got in Ohio, Obama did, and all the anomalies. And we don't trust the electronic voting machines since they're outsourced to be counted by Spain, a country not affiliated with the United States. I mean, our systems are so corrupted to their core, to their foundation. And it's not just the voting systems. It's not just the political systems or economic systems. It's the human systems. We've corrupted ourselves. And I was talking with Greg Jackson today before the show, and we were talking about a few things that he's been going over. And his book, Conservative Comeback to Liberal Lives, he's rephrasing it, and putting it in both in the right place. The liberal lies on the one side and the conservative crap on the other, I guess we can call it. Both playing different areas of the field with the same objective. And both are corrupted. And we talked about this the other day, 8% approval rating for Congress. People continue to remain in power. And you hear all the talking heads on the radio. I heard one fill-in host for Glenn Beck say, just because people don't go out and vote, and by not voting, you're actually voting, blah, 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 blah. But I'll tell you what, if these people want a person to be elected to a position, all the voters in America going out to vote won't stop that from happening.
No, you're exactly correct. Somebody had asked in an email, I just had glanced, and they wanted to know some of the institutions who were behind some of the actions that we see taking place today. And I thought that was a pretty interesting question. And last night, if you recall, the guest that we had on mentioned somebody attending the Albert Einstein Institution. Well, if you look at the chess game that's being played today, and you look at the coup plotters, the people who are doing all sorts of things behind the scenes, it's interesting. One organization popped up, and that's the Albert Einstein Institution, known as AEI. They have and continue to play roles in recent years in the training and deploying of youth movements to help prepare the conditions for coups across the world. If you want to know where a lot of the demonstrators come from, one might look at the Albert Einstein Institution. By the way, this group, which is funded by, you want to take a guess who's funding this? The person with a whole bunch of $1 billion? Of course, it's George Soros. Well, through his foundations. And guess who else is funding this Albert Einstein Institution? The United States government. This is just one group. In fact, the Albert Einstein Institution, their report, and I looked this up to verify this, their report back in 2004, their mission statement, the mission to advance the worldwide study and strategic use of nonviolent action in conflict. That's just a fancy way of saying, well, we're going to throw demonstrators into the mix, paid demonstrators, to sway public opinion and to stir things up. So what have we seen? We've seen a bunch of little brush fires. Well, if you're in them, I suppose classifying them as brush fires might not be the way to go. But you've got numerous individuals and organizations who are interested and active in the potential of nonviolent struggle.
These new technological weapons that they have, sound weapons. I'm looking at a 2012 executive branch publication.
Right, this plays into it. Go ahead.
The wireless spectrum, they call the master zoning plan, how to remove people from certain areas without actually going in and having to take them away.
See, okay, and that's very good, and I'm glad you brought that in at this point in time in this discussion, because what we're doing is dispatching these weapons, co-opting other NGOs of other countries. We'll just use Egypt, for example. The opposition forces to Mubarak grabbing these nonviolent weapons through NGOs, covered NGOs, non-governmental organizations or entities, and using them to their benefit. So there you've got that. That's the method you're looking at. Now we're still looking at people. Let's go to the International Center on Nonviolent Conflicts. That they have been very heavily involved in numerous coups, uprisings. And if you look at their website, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflicts, well, they develop and encourage the use of civilian-based non-military strategies to establish and defend democracy and human rights worldwide. At least that's the pretense.
Did you say the International Center for Transitional Justice?
International Center on Nonviolent Conflict.
Oh, I'm sorry, nonviolent. Okay, I have a list of the top 100 NGOs, according to Global Magazine, and this is from 2012. And some of them in here are very interesting. The Clinton Health Access Initiative is in the top 20.
And stop right there, because, ladies and gentlemen, Clinton, Hillary, and Bill both are globalists to their core. They are heavily influencing others in Washington and in world affairs. This is, the Clintons have a stranglehold on power, and this goes back to when Clinton was governor of Arkansas, making deals with the government, the criminal element of our government there, to smuggle in drugs from Central America. He played a very important role in this.
Yeah, and you might be surprised as the Clinton Clinton Health Access Initiative is ranked number 19. Who's ranked number 7? CARE International.
That's C-A-R-E or C-A-I-R?
C-A-R-E.
That's correct.
Yeah.
CARE International. C-A-R-E. You've got to understand that these benevolent-sounding organizations are being used as a pretext to foment disruption within countries. Everywhere we see, people think that these are natural uprisings. They're not.
No.
This is being choreographed.
As I click on each organization, I see very familiar names who are the heads of the corporations or organizations. Rockefellers, Bill and Melinda Gates, certain businesses that front for people like Bill and Melinda Gates and Ted Turner. Sometimes the globalists will use businesses as their prop or their names to shield them, their personal name, from being on a organizational list. And this happens very frequently. And when you have somebody like, we'll say, George Soros, who has so many different types of NGOs, the Open Society, the Constitution Society, the Bankrupt Country Society, whatever he names them, just like we have 100,000 different names of banks across the United States, like a vacuum. They all go right up to the Federal Reserve. And who owns those Federal Reserve buildings and rights? Well, the same people that own these NGOs and the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund. It is all the same agenda. The same people who are starting these wars are the same people who are promoting the peace. The same people who are saying we need to help the poor are the same people who are robbing from them. It is one intermingled deception. And if people don't do their homework...
But to what end? We do talk about, and I've written articles about World War III. I do believe, and folks, I don't want this to sound confusing or muddled in our delivery here, because we are trying to make a point. Look, the United States, China, Russia, Middle East, World War III is indeed possible. And in fact, encouraged by these, quote, nonviolent, end quote, government entities or non-government entities. They're being funded by globalists. So what we're seeing at the street level is different than what people are seeing from the 14th floor of a building, or what people are seeing at the top from the observation deck of the building. But as you go upward, as you go higher, you see a different picture emerge than the street level. We see so much reporting at the street level, and I don't mean that literally, I'm talking metaphorically. We see so much reporting about the conflict between Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Crimea. We see all of this. We're being flooded by this information. But what's really taking place? Because as our intelligence insider has often said, the lie is different at every level. Think of the Masonic rule, the Masonic order, the different orders as you go up the leadership or up the levels. This is what's taking place. Back in September of 2013 of last year, I was pretty prolific in writing articles about Syria, September, October, and even before that. But
from Benghazi to all that has happened in Libya, you have been to Syria, Egypt to Libya to Syria. You've been on top of the Middle East overthrow since its inception of the Arab Spring.
Well, one thing that surprised the heck out of me, folks, and I think that this bears additional discussion. You're looking at this. Everyone is. We'll just talk about Syria here. We're jumping around a little bit, but just bear with us. You look at the Syrian civil war. Isn't that classified as a civil war? Well,
it's funny how it's a civil war when the people of the country were, the citizens who were fighting each other weren't the ones that started or
exactly. Yeah. And it supposedly started in March of 2011. Well, of course, with the Arab Spring that was rising, and Syria, the people of Syria, they wanted to remove Bashar al-Assad from power. Assad's regime in April of 2011 did fire on protesters, killing innocent women and children. Look, Bashar al-Assad is no angel, but the fact of the matter is he's attempting to protect his hold on Syria.
Like football team owners, they don't go out and play the games. They organize the teams to go get the transportation to get to the field to play the game on time. In the same kind of sense, this is how these world leaders, what they're doing to manipulate people to bring them to civil war. They, as we heard from reports in Ukraine, the protesters and the policemen who were battling the protesters were shot by the same snipers. We've seen many YouTube videos where the instigators had to run and hide behind police lines because they were outed as they were the only ones turning over cars and setting dumpsters on fires. I mean, it's amazing the level of infiltration, sabotage that these people will go through just to get one group of people to kill another group of people, or even less than that, to dislike them for a start.
Correct. And where does the EU fit into all of this, the European Union? Especially when we're talking about Crimea and to a lesser extent Ukraine. Well, the European Union's characterization of the Crimean vote to join Russia as undemocratic. Well, talk about hypocrisy. Especially when you consider that the EU ignored its own citizens when they rejected the European Constitution. Did you know that? When you start peeling back the layers of this global onion, you find a bunch of stuff that's never reported on the news. Now,
yeah, I mean, just to go back to the top 100 NGOs, I found one of the name, the Architecture for Humanity. They have 73 chapters in 25 countries, and you can go to the list of their partners. Well, guess who some of their partners are? You have the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Ford Foundation, FEMA, Google, Habitat for Humanity, MTV. I mean, the interweaving of these public, out in the open corporations like Nike, MTV, Viacom, and then the hidden, elitist cabals. The White House is even on this list. Also the UN, with the Ford Foundation, the Rockefellers, etc. The Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, the Clinton Global Initiative.
Correct.
There is no end, and there's lots of scripture that talks about how they weave networks of deceit to catch people in their snares.
And I was just getting to that about Ukraine, for example. What does the Bible say, especially when we're looking at a potential World War III? And you've got to look at this from not only a historical perspective, but also to be true, really, to current events. What does the Bible say? Does the Bible say anything at all about this?
It says a whole bunch. It's from thousands of years ago that says it.
Right. Look, the various revolutions and protests and uprisings in Ukraine, and of course, it made no real sense that the Ukrainian president fled to Russia, Russian troops, or more precisely, Russian-backed Ukrainians, depending on who you might believe, are in Crimea. Obama warns Russia and has warned Russia and is warning Ukraine. Russia's warning Ukraine, that is. What does all of this mean? Is this, in fact, how World War III starts? I don't believe necessarily that this will be the World War III spark. I do believe that we have to keep our eyes on Syria, folks. You've heard me talk about this. But what does the Bible have to say about World War III? At least, if you want to call it World War IV, that's fine. But what does the Bible have to say? And
well, that's a good question, because there are many conflicts described in the Bible that have not taken place yet, mainly the Gog-Magog, Ezekiel 38.
And Psalm 83 war. And
could be World War III, could be another conflict. And we know we have the final battle of Armageddon.
Right.
But that's not...
And folks, we have to be... Sorry. Sorry about that. We have to be very aware of the timeline, because Armageddon is the end battle.
Correct. After the 1,000-year millennium.
Correct. So when we talk about World War III being the end battle, that's not necessarily correct. There's going to be a lot of real estate, a lot of time between now and the end. The Bible does talk about a great war at the end of the present age, a war that's going to kill many people, great bloodshed. You look at Revelation 6, verse 4, and that talks about the red horse, powers given to him, sat there on to take peace from the earth, and so on. That the Bible does not say exactly where this great war will start. Now, it does say where it will end, and that's of course at the Battle of Armageddon in the valley outside of Jerusalem. Okay.
Not to correct you, but in my opinion, it does say where the war starts, and it is only in the hearts of men, evil men.
Well, okay, you got me there.
Not geographically.
Right, you got me there. But we see clues from the Bible, and I've been turning to the Bible a lot more as a reference for the war, especially the shaping of this power cabal that's taking place. The current structure is about oil, energy, in the future, and it's against the United States. I suppose to boil it down to the simplest terms, what we're seeing is an attempt. The process, not an attempt, but the process of taking out the U.S. dollar. And the bankers have everything to do with this, the not only the ones that are living and in control of things, but also those who have allegedly committed suicide. Because this really is a banker's war. Now, I know we're all over the map topically here, but it really does all come down to a few simple truths, in my opinion, here as we get close to the top of the hour. The few simple truths are that the United States right now is engaged in a stage play with Russia, Obama versus Putin. Putin is being deified in many circles, and even by many conservatives, as this great leader with morals and principles. But the fact of the matter is, he's not that. But relative to Obama, he is that. Okay, I mean, if by comparison, now, this is just for our benefit. What was Ukraine, Crimea? This is for our benefit. What's really taking place here, and where our real danger lies, the danger that will affect every listener, when the United States can no longer assure the protection of oil and energy, and then that task falls outside of the hands of the United States, which Obama has been instructed to assure to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Gaddafi nationalizing his oil.
There you go.
We have the central banks, the oil, Saddam Hussein setting the oil wells on fire. There's something about that oil that the people in the Middle East don't want the United States to get control of.
And one last thing before we bring Stan on, and folks, I would encourage everyone to really understand this, because this will be key. I believe this will be key. At some point in the future, we're looking at Aramco setting up shop in Saudi Arabia and really creating the royal family. Isn't that what happened back in the 20th century? Indeed it is. So you've got this CIA operation, OSS/CIA operation in Saudi Arabia, setting up shop, Aramco. And you've got all of the government officials at that time and in the future being a part of this oil energy operation. Then, well, because of time, let's just take it to right now. What do we have right now? We've got Saudi Arabia, who is really looking for alternative wells because many of their wells were damaged during the Gulf War, as well as the natural decline of output.
Also, there was an article very recently, within the last week, of how fracking has increased the U.S.'s oil taking the oil out of the earth to the level of Saudi Arabia, and projected to be next year higher than Saudi Arabia.
Their oil drilling processes,
yes.
However, not fracking necessarily.
It actually cited fracking.
Okay, yeah, I know, and people will say, well, wait a minute, to have that discussion would I get that, but we'll just say to extract the oil. But here's the problem between the oil here in the U.S. and the oil overseas, aside from the type, grade, and use and what have you. The what is termed, and I learned this from W, of course, and verified this through additional research, the lift cost, the cost of getting it out of the ground. We'll just use this as an example. Saudis will say
silver prices, like you said, the silver mines. You can sell it for less than $20 an ounce because of the cost of mining it.
Right. At some point, you've got to say, wait a minute, you can't be taking a loss. Well, Saudi Arabia, they have the lowest lift costs in the world. In other words, getting the oil out of the ground is exponentially cheaper, less costly than it would be for the United States. But the Saudi oil wells damaged, declining in output. Now the Saudis are looking for other oil sources of oil. And of course, oil-rich North Africa, that very special region between Benghazi and the eastern border of Libya, the eastern border of Libya, very oil-rich. Isn't it convenient, if not non-coincidental, that that's where the U.S. doing Saudi Arabia's bidding did strike, and of course, we took over Libya, and of course, who's got control of that oil? Also, when we speak about oil, and I'll close with this, watch what George Soros is doing. Watch where he's putting his money, and if you look at where that's taking place, where's that taking place at? Off the coast of South America. I said all that to say this. Don't look at Ukraine, Crimea as merely the end of or this period where this is going to be decisive. It's not. This is a game of chess. There are moves, and these globalists are thinking 3, 4, 5, 6 moves ahead than even what we're seeing. It's that important. This is about the future. This is about ultimately shaping the entire world into these economic regions that will be managed by this one world government. That's the ultimate objective here. And everything is pushing, whether it's the IMF in Ukraine or whether it's the Russian ship off of Florida. Look at the bigger picture. Look what's happening. It's an attack on the sovereignty of the United States, yes, either directly or by proxy.
And the key words to their global peace is peace and safety, peace and security, goodwill, and so much more. But we're up to this Tuesday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this March 18th, 2014, with our very special guest, Mr. Stan Deyo. Stan, it's great to have you back. I hope you are feeling better.
Marginally so, yes. Pretty good.
Well, that's great. Holly's doing better as well?
Oh, yeah, she's fine now. She's nursing me now with some, pills and stuff that I got to keep my voice from cracking here a bit. So.
Well, we're going to have to send her a check because we need you guys to stay healthy.
Yeah, she's good like that. With some of that Manuka honey that's got antibacterial properties, and some lemon and hot water and a bit of brandy. And so, if I don't feel better that one way, I'll feel better the other way. You see.
I'd like to get that recipe combination from you. Wow.
I watched her do it today so that I could reproduce it. It's nice.
That's great. Well, Stan, what's on your radar, man? I'll tell you what. There's so much news breaking everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Where do you start?
Well, yeah, we're hoping you could shed some light on this.
Well, one thing I'm watching quite closely is the swarm of earthquakes over just northeast of L.A. That could presage an even bigger quake in that area, which is rather interesting because it's where some of the fault lines take a little jag to the northwest up toward the Juan de Fuca plate up near Eureka. There have been a huge number. In fact, if you go into our website, I will, I'll send this to the people in the chat room here, and you can put it up there. This is the URL to our web page there where the picture is. And if you visit the actual website itself, it's in the first news column for March 18th, and it's about the second picture down. And then there's articles around that. That's one area on the planet that the earthquakes are kind of, bother me a bit. I'm looking at the whole ring of fire, trying to figure out, where the next big one's going to be, because it is overdue in the Juan de Fuca area. But, it could be overdue for another 10 or 15 years. But these things do seem to be coming up from Chile and Peru up to our area here.
And experts and geologists have been warning about a major quake in the west-northwest region. We've seen, as you talked about, these just clusters of earthquakes, especially in California and Oregon as of late. And what's interesting to me is the depth. I've been paying attention to the depth of earthquakes for a while, and I think we've talked about this in the past show, but a depth of 10 kilometers seems to be pretty universal of quakes 4.5 and above across the world. No matter where we are or where the quakes are, that depth always pops out at me. Is there anything significant that you know of that would cause the same depth to reoccur so much in so many different places?
Well, like we've discussed a number of times, it is my hypothesis at this point that the planet is expanding. It's part of a natural aging of planets as they slow down their spin. And that would expand the Earth, the diameter of it would get larger. We see evidence in the geological record, which is pretty much now an accepted theory, that at one time the Earth was about 25% smaller in diameter. And then all of a sudden, or over a period of time, it expanded to split the one landmass, Gondwana land, or whatever you want to call the early landmass, split it into the continents we have today because of the stretching of the outer layer of the mantle of the planet. Now, these shallow earthquakes at 10 miles deep are definitely in the thin outer layer of the planet's mantle. The deeper earthquakes, 35 miles and below, down several hundred miles, they do happen, but they aren't being stretched as much as the surface because the surface is further away from the center of the planet, and hence the stretching is more pronounced on the very surface of the planet. Anyway, that's why I think we're seeing more shallow ones all over the place, and why we're seeing sinkholes, because the thinness of the mantle as it stretches is starting to relieve sideways pressure on the dirt and rocks, and causing areas that would normally withstand the water intrusion around them to fail because the pressure isn't there to keep the water back, hydrostatic pressure. Looking on the earthquake map for the last, week that USGS puts out, you can see significant earthquakes in New Guinea and north of New Zealand, up in those islands there, near the Kermadec, and you can see them in southern Japan. These are big ones in clusters, and of course we all know about the ones in South America. I mean, those have been enormous in number and magnitude, and that's the one I've been kind of watching, because we're now starting to see reasonable-sized quakes, in the 3 to 4 Richter coming up through the Central American area. And Mexico City, just had one that was a Richter 4. But in that area, we see Popocatépetl. Yeah, I couldn't even say that sober. But anyway, it's a volcano, and we know that preceding major eruptions of volcanoes, you will see a cluster or flurry of smaller earthquakes. Now, is that going to happen up in California, in the Los Angeles area, or is it going to happen, at the bottom of the Juan de Fuca plate, where we're seeing right on the, it's like a ridge that goes across the North Pacific, left and right, the Mendocino Ridge. It goes right into the top part of California, Eureka there, but it also forms the bottom part of the Juan de Fuca plate. And, we've had a 5.2 there in the last week. In the last hour, we've had a 3.1, a few others before that are around the 3 to 4 magnitude. But they're all in an area where you don't want to see them. The Juan de Fuca plate is where the biggest pressure on the West Coast is building up, that northwest, that what they're warning about. And that could be a Richter 9 or greater. And that's just like,
yeah, the damage
huge.
From that. We'll say, 50 miles off the coast. I don't know what a good distance would be for maximum damage. But a 9.0, Northern California, right between Oregon and Northern California, what kind of damage would we be looking at?
Because it's a reasonably populated area, and a lot of infrastructure is there. It's going to be probably as bad, well, maybe not as bad, as the death toll of the Richter 9 over in the Indian Ocean here a few years back at Banda Aceh, I think it was. Where is that? That's Sumatra, I think. Anyway, over in that area there where it rocked the planet and actually slowed the planet down a microsecond or two. It'll be that kind of a thing, and it'll be offshore like this one was, like the one over in western Indonesia there. And so for the United States, it would be extremely bad, like the U.S. Highway 1 would probably go, and a lot of homes that sit up on the sand dunes at the edge of California. I find that to be madness, but anyway, they sit perched right over the edge, and I think a lot of those rather expensive homes will go. There will be some damage to perhaps the San Joaquin Valley if the tidal wave does go down that far. I doubt it unless the earthquake occurs just right opposite Los Angeles. Then we could see damage to the San Joaquin Valley. But I think San Joaquin probably will be safe from any tsunami activities. It's only protected by a 16-foot high wall of debris. And so theoretically, if the tidal wave were to happen right offshore of, say, San Francisco, I think, that'd probably be the closest one, that it will possibly drive water into the San Joaquin through some dams and stuff, but not a lot. There's power. There's nuclear plants that could be hit by all this. Certainly farms and production areas that we need to feed the nation would be impacted. And if something like that happens under Cascadia, under the Cascades mountain ranges, we may see triggers that put pressure on the magma pools beneath the volcanoes all along the Cascade Range, and they may start to erupt. So a quake in this area is going to have some rather interesting repercussions, and I'm not sure that anyone could positively say which ones will be prominent and which ones will occur. But those are some of the possibilities. It's just not a nice place to disgorge, that kind of a tidal wave or a shock wave in the dirt.
Yeah, and then while we're talking on earthquakes, the swarm near Oklahoma of these smaller earthquakes, many attribute this to fracking and other geological construction works. Is that what you would think that these swarms are coming from in Oklahoma, or do you see this as something separate from man-made or man-caused?
Well, the fact that they run vertically from Oklahoma City, north, does indicate to me that it may not be tied to the New Madrid fault line, and that these may be man-made quakes. they go up into Kansas just briefly. So, they start at Oklahoma City and go north up into the middle of Kansas and up just 50 to 100 miles. Is that fracking? Well, I had that URL I sent to you. Oh gosh, 2 or 3 shows ago. Remember when we were looking at the fracking? We could see it on a live plot showing where the fracking operations were going, and we could see that a lot of those in Oklahoma were centered right in the area where these smaller quakes are going. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a nuisance. It may disturb groundwater to wells around the area, but other than that, I'm not sure I'm as concerned about that as I am at the moment about the northwest of the United States up there.
Okay, interesting. I'm looking through the links that you did send before the show.
Well, Stan, given the activity, the increase in activity up there, are we looking at the potential for something happening? And I know you don't have a crystal ball timepiece or whatever, but
don't be too sure. He's a great inventor.
Well, yeah, but don't these things happen, build up to like a crescendo? Can you tell, for example, that we're getting close to something larger based on the smaller events that you talked about?
It is possible. If you talk to the USGS personnel, they will say, yes, it is possible. They don't know whether it's 5% of the time, more or less, but a small percentage of the time, these clusters or flurries of earthquakes can lead to a bigger one within a few hours or days. If that's the case, we should be seeing something this week in the northern California region there at the very tip of the Juan de Fuca Plate. If you look on the USGS 7-day plots, earthquake plots map, you'll see an outline of the Juan de Fuca Plate there and that little toe that sticks down and stops at right outside Eureka in California. That's where these earthquakes are occurring. I haven't seen that in a while, so I guess we'll kind of watch it. If we get through this week, then we'll say, well, maybe that was just a local flurry of some little aftershocks or something from the one that occurred up in, just where the toe hooks onto the rest of the body of the Juan de Fuca Plate. That occurred a few days ago, on the 13th. So, yeah, flurries in unusual places, watch. And the thing that kind of really gets my attention is going back to South America on the west coast, in Peru and Chile, Ecuador. These areas here are pretty active at the moment with some significant sized quakes. Unfortunately, the tidal wave or tsunami type damage is minimal, if any, there, if they had any. So even though they prepared for it, I don't think there was a lot of backlash, but there's certainly a lot of aftershocks in that one down in northern Chile area. Let's watch the next few days and see what Central America does. If it starts to have 1 or 2 big ones, and particularly Mexico City, I'm interested in that. That might indicate some serious plate movement, which could eventually cause a lot of volcanoes along the west coast of the United States and down as far as Mexico City to start erupting at the same time. If that happens, hopefully people have moved east of the Rockies before that, because that won't be good for the whole west coast.
Now, I know Holly has written, or has distributed, Dare to Prepare, of course, and has information in there about this, as well as Prudent Places USA. But given the current, and I'm talking about the current situations with earthquakes, I kind of get the impression we know where not to be at this point. Is there a safe place in the United States or North America at all? Or
my dad wants a bunker.
We get asked that a lot. I think you can use a bit of wisdom. We can't guarantee any place to be safe from all threats. If you say safe from tsunami, well, obviously you get away from the coastlines. If you say safe from earthquakes, and the shock waves and whatever, that could be the West Coast, that could be, perhaps Oklahoma, but certainly the New Madrid area. So, okay, then you don't live along the Mississippi up to the Great Lakes region. On either side of that, you get clear of it a bit. On the West Coast, you get east of the Rockies. If you look at weather at the moment, since the climate appears to be changing and the weather is chaotic and severe, I don't know that we can rely on our statistical results for tornadoes, hurricanes, ice storms, temperatures, winds. I mean, right now Colorado is getting clobbered with windstorms, and they're so bad that they're moving mountains, and I mean mountains that cover houses, of tumbleweeds from the prairie over into the inhabited areas here of Colorado. Colorado Springs, Pueblo County, where we are. It's an ongoing thing just to catch these things and try to burn them, because they pile up on the sides of houses and cars like snow would, but they're just a little harder to handle. Okay, those kind of anomalies will be in a lot of places. You can deal with tumbleweeds. About the only direct problem, other than being a nuisance and a fire hazard, is if they blow across the roads in front of traffic on the highway on I-25, as for instance, and they blow across at a speed that looks like a rabbit or a small dog running at certain times of the day, and it causes cars to swerve or put on the brakes suddenly if they aren't, adjusted to tumbleweeds blowing in their path. It's just an automatic reflex. And so, other than that, in our area here, that's our anomaly, and plus drought, extreme drought. So, would you move here to Colorado? Don't know. Would that be a safe place? Well, it's where we are. It's where the good Lord put us, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a safe place. It's just where we're supposed to be for this period of time. You can use common sense. Get away from the coastlines. Don't sit on top of fault lines. Don't build on top of fault lines. Try to get into a median temperature range and rainfall range on the historical records, and hope to goodness that the climate change keeps it somewhere in that range for you if you're going to endure and grow crops and things. But that's why Holly got that Prudent Places, a USA book that's on CD-ROM and USB drive. That's why she put it together, was because we got asked this question time after time after time over the last 15 years. And you have to ask a person, you say, well, look, where's a safe place for you? Or where's a wise place or prudent place? And we'd say to them, well, where do you live? What kind of work do you need to do? Are you able to move to wherever you want to? Are you aged and need hospital care and stuff close by? Can you deal with altitude and lower oxygen levels or not? So there's about 75 different parameters you could ask to kind of try to figure out where a person might wisely go. In the end, the individual can take the data that she's made available on these huge maps down to county level and city level of all kinds of different threats, and look at that. They can look at that in their area and say, well, I'm good off where I am. I can deal with the threats that are in my area. And believe me, there's no area without threats of some kind. Or they can say, well, look, I'd rather be such and such a place and take my chances with, flood versus where I am now. Fine. I'd like to move to some other place where there aren't so many nuclear reactors close by. Well, fine. Here's how you find it. Other than that, I don't know how to answer the question generally for everyone, where is a prudent place or a safe place? The climate changes are going to go in a lot of places. It depends on where the spin axis of the planet ends up afterwards. Ice is melting quicker than they thought this month in the north, and sea levels are starting to rise and encroach on coastal dwellings. We definitely have a threat of nuclear war from Putin and his crowd over there, and because our administration is, kowtowing to Russia and to China, we are basically defenseless. And should, Putin decide to move on Israel, before he does that, he will be sure that we're neutered over here, which would be nuclear attack, which he's already said they could absolutely burn us to the ground with nuclear attack, especially since America has a policy of wait until they hit us before we strike back. Let's let them hit us in the face first, and then we can fight back. Well, one hit from this kind of nuclear arsenal would definitely destroy America's ability to defend themselves or Israel. And at that time, then we will be facing nuclear fallout, EMP damage to equipment and stuff like that. In fact, one of your listeners emailed me a while ago wanting to know about something he'd heard about Faraday cages, to shield your radio and electronics and stuff from EMPs over the United States, whether they are caused by the sun or by the enemy or whatever. Whenever I've talked about making Faraday cages, they are out of conductive material like fine wire mesh or just solid metal, and you build a box, whatever size you want, to hold the things you're trying to protect from EMP damage inside of it. Now, I always say to ground it, put a wire from that cage and stick it onto a 8-foot pole, copper pole driven down into the ground and into moist ground, so that the charge doesn't build up on the outside of the Faraday cage and then re-radiate, radiation, which might damage stuff inside the field. Now, that would take a pretty intense EMP strike, and if you lived right underneath where that happens, this would be a requirement, I think, to go in and ground your Faraday cage, or your Faraday cage made out of a metal trash can with everything inside of it. We do suggest that you try to put in like foam, or like polystyrene foam or something like that, polyurethane foam on the floor and of your cage inside, so that all your objects are electrically insulated from the Faraday cage itself, so that no bleed off frequencies can build up and zap your equipment inside. So safe way to do that, that listener, is ground it, and then you've got the best of both worlds. Okay.
So a poor man's Faraday cage, let's just say a metal garbage can with a lid inside your electronics.
Piece of foam down at the bottom.
Right. Okay. And then a wire going to a copper pipe that's driven into the ground.
Water pipe would be ideal.
Okay, good.
Now, one other thing, you can't just take these store-bought metal cans, trash cans, and shove the lid on and call it good. You can't have any air gaps or any open gaps between the lid and the can, and sometimes they're not made to fit as snugly as you'd want. So what you do is you take some aluminum foil and you wind up a bunch of that to put around the rim of the garbage can, and then shove your lid down on top of that to make a very strong electrical seal around that. It's a thing people forget sometimes, but yeah, it's and here's the sad part about this. There's no calendar published that says you're going to get an EMP strike on such and such a date at such and such a time, and that'll be the only one you get. Because if there were, you could be sure everything was in the safe cage at that time, take it out and use it without concern. We don't know how many EMPs are going to strike us and how far apart they will be. So you may want to look at, a couple garbage cans or 3 with backups of backups of backups if you want to try to get through all those, because they're going to catch you with your pants down if you're not careful, and they'll zap what you're using once you've taken it out of the safe can and after an EMP is already hit.
No, that makes sense. And Stanley, I got to tell you, I've got a lot of emails wanting me to ask you to address, the current geopolitical situation. I mean, there's various questions in among the emails I've received, having gone through them, and you referenced them just moments ago in your discussion about Russia, China, United States, and so we've got probably, I would say, I don't know, 12.5 emailers from all across the world, including one from France and one from the UK, wanting your assessment on what's taking place with Ukraine, with Russia, with Crimea, with the United States, Obama, Putin, that whole shebang.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd throw that out there because you did reference that earlier.
Yeah, the Putin needed another seaport there to help him in the Middle East. He's playing a long range game here, and I think Cyprus is another place where he's located a base. With those two as seaports, it gives him a great deal of control over his troop activity in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean. I think that was one of the major things he wanted to have it for that. Greece, Cyprus, yeah. The one in Cyprus is probably the best one because it's right close to the action, but it could also be a target for strike back by the Israelis. So he wanted probably a backup base. That would be my thought on it. I could be wrong, but and there may be also some financial reasons. I've heard, he's going after the 20 tons of gold or something they've got there in I don't know whether it's in the area where he's talked about there or not. I'm just checking something here. Give me a second. Crimea may hold it, or don't know where it is. There's some question about where the gold has gone before Putin struck, and we don't know whether he actually got it or not. And that certainly could be a motive to take not only Crimea but Ukraine itself. Anyway, I'm just looking at something here.
Okay, and I'll just put this question on deck for you to address whenever you would like. I've gotten, a dozen and a half on the topic I just mentioned, but I'll tell you, I can't even count the number of questions, people emailing me. In fact, it started last Thursday, Friday, in earnest, wanting us to ask you about the missing aircraft. So we'll put that question on deck, given what you know right now.
Can you just repeat that? I had some kind of audio thing override my system here. Did you hear it while you were talking?
No, I didn't hear it.
I could hardly hear. I thought we'd gone to some kind of commercial break or something. But
wow. Yeah, no. We received since late last week. I've gotten just a lot of emails. In fact, a couple of people urging me to send the emails off to you. But a question on deck here: what happened to that missing 777? In your knowledge of what we can see, what radar can see, and because there are so many wild theories out there, but are they really that wild? So at some time when you feel the time is right, we've got a lot of interested people wanting to know your thoughts on, shouldn't we be able to find or know where this aircraft is? So again, at your convenience when you think the time is right.
Well, look, at the moment, I'm as in the dark as most of you about what really happened, and if it's an ongoing issue, whether they're all dead or not. I've heard the things, about, its engines kept sending reports to the satellite for 2 hours after it went off radar, and, one report showed 20 employees of a particular company that did a certain kind of chip research. It was quite unique, but their Asian staff 20 of them were on board, and they thought it was Tesla technology, and so they took them out because of that. I don't know. The problem is that the reports just don't jive between, the Asians and the Americans and Chinese reports. I mean, who do you believe? What's true or not? There's something very odd about it, because they're not adding up to even similar reports or, explanations at all, and there's no debris, no oil slick. The Chinese have been the only ones that thought they saw, a piece of wing wreckage, and that hasn't been verified either, from one of their satellites.
Right, that 73-foot piece of debris or something. It was, or two pieces, but they have since reportedly ruled that out. But the questions that I've received have been interesting insofar as, we've got all of this surveillance technology where the NSA they can listen to everything that we're saying, and they've got surveillance everywhere. So if we are to believe that we live in a surveillance planet, wouldn't it stand to reason that this plane really is not missing? It might be hidden from us, the uninitiated, the unwashed. It's known to the high levels of government where this aircraft is. Wouldn't that sound reasonable, or is that just a fairy tale?
I would think so. And then again, you say, well, okay, they've got all this technology, but they've lied to us before. They lied to us constantly for various reasons they can justify. Is this another one of those things where it's better that we don't know? I mean, I can't figure out why it would be, but I do think that the plane would be detectable, especially over that area, because I know that we monitor a lot of the area in the Indian Ocean for, military reasons. So it must have been on somebody's radar or somebody's detection equipment, especially from orbit. There's so many satellites there. And if you watch TV, all these CSI and military shows or whatever, they punch a little button on their keyboard and they they task a satellite to go over and photograph an area, which would do that. But now the problem is that satellites, to get high resolution photos, we don't have enough satellites, I don't think, to make videos real time of the entire planet. They may, but it would require a satellite, an orbital satellite there in the Indian Ocean or Bay of Bengal area there to track that. And since we do have military interest in the Indian Ocean there, maybe they would have something to cover it. I just don't know, because that kind of information is so classified that we'd never know it unless we were working for them. So we'll just leave it at that a moment and hope somebody breaks, the story of the truth of it.
CNN's been doing an excellent job from disappearing in midair to extraterrestrial involvement to, I mean, you should hear some of the things that are coming out of that network about what happened to this plane as it dominates the majority of time since it's been missing of their TV station. And this is from articles I've read of people reporting on how bad their reporting is. It's amazing the amount of different theories that are out there about this plane.
Did you ever get the names of the people in the airliner that crashed in the Pentagon and disintegrated? Did they ever list the bodies?
I didn't know a plane crashed into the Pentagon, but
Barbara Olson being one, I believe.
Where were the bodies? I mean, I didn't see them taking bodies really in any great number. And, the same for that one that didn't make it to the White House that crashed, vertically went down, where they said, let's roll, and they never seemed to find any of the bodies of that either. Just kind of makes me wonder what happened to the people that were scheduled on those flights. Where'd they go?
In Flight 93, it left a smoking hole in the ground.
Yeah,
with
that's
nothing else
what
there.
Stan was referring to. Yeah.
That's the name of it, yeah.
I got to tell you, Stan, on September 11th of during the attacks, I was on the phone with a gentleman in an office across from Cleveland Hopkins Airport, and he was describing to me a plane on the ground. It was away from the main terminal. It was near a building. It was described like a storage building, but it was the type of plane that was hijacked, surrounded by a small SWAT group, and they were taking the people off of this aircraft. Now, what I got to tell you, Stan, I've never. Now, this was an eyewitness. I mean, in fact, I just talked to this gentleman today, and it was kind of funny because we had referenced that conversation on 9/11/2001, and he said, look, I know what I saw, but there was no reports on the Cleveland Plain Dealer, no reports on the Cleveland in the Cleveland media, none whatsoever. And so his question was, what was that plane, and who were the people, and what happened? So, given your reference to, where the bodies and what have you,
you got to wonder where they. To be like that. That show about they never went to the moon, where they took the astronauts over to a secret place and were going to kill them. Did they take the passengers to a place and disappear them permanently, or what?
And that's the biggest problem I have with this missing flight. You see the people holding the signs out there, pray for Flight 370 and family members, which we haven't verified them to be for sure family members, but if there are 239 people out there missing family members tonight because of that plane, they got to really be asking themselves some serious questions and asking the government some serious questions, because if it was one of my family members on that plane, I would be livid right now, because none of this makes any sense.
I know. There's no explanation. There's certainly no closure. It's just not right. There's something wrong.
Should we be spending our time, or I shouldn't say spending our time. How much interest with all the news out there? It just seems to me something about this Flight 370. is very well. Everything is troublesome about it, but there's something different about this. Should we be focusing at all on this, or is this just a mere footnote in the news stories that we're looking at?
Well, I hate to say footnote, but is it as important as what's happening in Ukraine and the Middle East? Probably not, unless it's some kind of a butterfly effect that we're not aware of.
Well, yeah, and I didn't mean any. I didn't mean anything, because obviously we're talking about human lives and family members, and the humanity aspect aside, what's going on here. But yeah, because at this point, Stan, don't you find yourself having to triage news stories? I don't know how else to describe it. Triage events, global events, and looking at what's most important and how these events interrelate.
Oh, yeah, of course. Holly does it more than I do, and I go through how she's separated into the three columns there, the types of news that we ought to be looking at. The things are so interlocked at a political and economic and weather and warfare type level that you need a supercomputer, and I'm sure that would help you entirely to figure out the outcome, because it could take something as simple as some particular diplomat that was going to sign a paper in the UN, his plane crashing or him dying or whatever, and throw the whole world into turmoil because that particular meeting, or his particular presence there did not take place. And, so I do worry that small events among those top 4 or 5 areas of triage, I know it's for 3, but the top areas of interest or potential threat, those things just, they're very important. And you got to watch them all and be right on top of it, which Holly tries to do every day, except the weekends. But
me too. I spend a lot of time going over news, and the more I learn how to do it, the less the time I actually spend on stories like this flight. As I was eating lunch with a friend today who came in from out of town, and we were talking about this, and he said, I spent all week on paying attention to Ukraine and to this flight, and I'm basically more stressed out and confused now than I was when the stories broke. And this doom distraction, this whatever it takes it's almost like a beta test at some level to see what captivates the attention of the most people, to misdirect them at one way, like a magician, while they're doing something with their other hand.
We know that they do that, especially when there's like economic problems. They might have, what the latest Hollywood hero has been taken to jail for, and you spend a week on that, and miss the real issue of the global economy's collapsing or something.
Exactly. Yeah, it's maddening, and that's why we do, and folks listening to this, when we have Stan on, I mean, obviously, talk about at the genius level with respect to Earth events, and I'm serious. Physics, matters of physics and everything, but in reality, I mean, the real here and now, the news stories that people are getting barraged with, we're looking at this and saying, yeah, we understand the big picture. We understand that we're being lied to, but out of all of this, where are you looking? And that's why we come across and ask you, what's on your radar, and you tell us.
Obviously, I try to do the best I can, but
yeah,
I rely on Holly a lot because she gets up and starts gathering up before I get up, and then we talk about it and try to figure out, what's really going on, whether we're being, misdirected by the magicians of this age. Lord,
what they might be trying to do is, with so many baby boomers and the increase in Alzheimer's and autism and these different diseases, maybe they're trying to confuse the older generation, genocide via confusion of the mind, with the increase of stories. Did you see the story of the pastor who admitted to his congregation of an affair some 20 years ago, and as they were talking with him, he dropped dead of a heart attack?
Yeah, I saw that. Oh, wow.
And I believe many people are on edge like that for whatever reason. Maybe it's a past event, maybe it's something that they're going through, but this adds to the hysteria that is then is used to tailor the news to us, depending on the level of chaos they want our minds to be in, or whatever state of chaos they want our minds to be in.
Yeah, they herd us to the gate they want us to be running through, and sometimes I take my mind off of all this to back off for a second and come back with a clear mind and try to look objectively at things, because you do tend to.
Yeah.
Right.
People, one of the great ways I heard it being described is that each news story is a dot or a thread. You can't see the big picture if you're focused on one little dot. You need to get rid of the fear of men and of the things of this earth, only fearing the Lord. Then get back and use your relationship with the Lord to discern through these things. Otherwise, I see how people drive themselves crazy. I understand why it says in the Bible, people's hearts will fail them for fear for what is coming upon the earth.
Yeah. Holly says to me, you don't get affected by all this stuff as much as I do. This is really depressing looking at this every day. And she's right. I filter out a lot of things that are down in the lower triage area and hit the highlights and say, well, that's maybe what's happening. And if it is, okay, can we do anything about it? Well, maybe not, or maybe yes, and then take action, on the basis of that. I guess I'm a little more pragmatic and just kind of, look at things and think about it a bit.
For my wife and her family and some of my family who's starting to really pay attention, now that they are understanding things better, one question keeps popping up between them is, how can you cover these news stories every day and have a good attitude? And it's definitely nothing I've done. It's something the Lord has to have done through me, because I was never one to be patient and discerning and taking my time. But there is a point you reach where it's all, as I wrote in the chat room, it's all noise. And aside from a very minute percent of things happening on the earth that are important, those are all drowned out by all the other noise that's around. And
well, that's a good example. I mean, a good way to say it. It's the noise level.
Yeah, and it's getting much louder, and it's getting louder at a faster pace. And, we have people sitting on their edge of the seats waiting for an economic collapse at any second. We have people basically living to the parameters of the world rather than living to the example of Christ.
Yes, I suppose that's true. And certainly, even without looking at the news, our daily activities, family and job and stuff and entertainment, can become quite demanding on our time and our attention. And that just adds to the noise that you were saying a while ago. Good grief, we've already gone almost to the closing time of the show here.
It is always as fast as a blink of an eye when you come on, Stan. That's why you're always staying over late. We can't get through half the questions we need to.
Well, all right.
I do have a listener question about the precious metals market. We've seen gold has continued to rise and is at a year high. And do you see the metals continuing to slowly, or at least gold continuing to slowly creep up there as other commodities are also rising in price, even with the manipulation?
It's anybody's guess. I've been wondering, I'm trying to balance prophecies in the Bible about the rich men will throw their gold and silver in the streets as cankered or rotten, no value. And I kind of thought, well, that'll be when resources like food and water, electricity, when those things are in very short supply, that the gold and silver will be useless because people won't want to sell their stuff because they want to use it. Gold and silver are only in an economy that's, everybody's eating and things are balanced and, there's plenty of supply of whatever you need. that might be when the gold and silver the Bible talks about becomes cankered. On the other hand, because there's so much attention given to buy gold, by all these brokerages and people that sell gold, buy silver, buy platinum. Everybody's saying buy precious metals. Well, they're down 13, 19. They're down maybe a third or more of what they were a couple of years ago, and really I don't see any signs of the upward push being rapid. And there may be a short period of time, weeks or months, where suddenly the U.S. dollar will be devalued and gold and silver will be prime, and you can convert to U.S. dollars. I don't know whether it'd be converting to U.S. dollars domestic or U.S. dollars international, because they'll have a different exchange rate if they do what they're planning to do. The powers that be have probably got all the gold and silver they want for whatever they're manufacturing or will manufacture in their bunkers where they live, or will live, full time when things hit the fan. It's almost like Atlas Shrugged movie, where the producers in that book or movie were the wealthy who had developed industries to employ people and make the world better. So they took all their holdings, converted them to gold, and go to a secret place in a valley that's hidden by holographic images, and have their own farms, and they produce and exchange between themselves, and use produce and gold and silver between themselves as a medium of exchange. While outside that valley, the rest of the world couldn't tie their shoes anymore. They couldn't run the rails. They couldn't do the coal mines. So no one was there to direct it and tell them how to solve their problems. And they just let the rest of the world eat itself and die, and just diminish the population hugely until the time that the producers that Ayn Rand wrote about in Atlas Shrugged would come out of their valley and help reestablish the world on a basis of you work, you earn. You slack off, you don't get anything. And this is kind of what I see happening with the gold and silver. I think it's being, siphoned off into secret deposits. And that, with the alternate energy that they've got in the back room and transport and saucers and whatever, is what they're putting away to wait until the greedy people of the world die off or realize the value of actually working for what you consume. And at that time, they plan to step back in and control the planet and try to avoid, the situation we're in now, where the greedy and lazy are predominantly in charge of the planet, and they're just consuming more than they produce and leaving a small amount of us to pay their fare. That I can't argue with, but the idea of going back to a dictatorship under those people is not exactly what I would consider a smart move, unless it's the good Lord himself in charge, and then that's the best move. But
yeah, and then, a lot of people have issues, when talking about gold and silver, but the way I understand it and look at it is like a vehicle, or something you need in case of an emergency or in order to get something done. It's a means to an end. But there are many people out there that put their faith in that to save them. And the scriptures are very clear, that we came in this world with nothing and we will leave with nothing. Yet so many people cling to the things that are in this earth as though they are valuable. And it is just, it's hard for me to fathom that these evil people not only want to gain the whole world and its wealth and think they're going to live forever. What don't they want? I guess is the question.
Well, I can't understand a lot of people that just say they would rather just go on the dole or on the Social Security or whatever rather than work. I mean, Social Security, if you're elderly and you've done your time, okay, fine. But these generational families that get food stamps and handouts from the government think, well, I'll sit home and watch TV all day. Why do I need to do anything? Those kind of worry me. They're really not contributing, and they're in greater number than those of us that are contributing, and that's the concern, that we will be. Well, they will cause us to collapse. Is what it amounts to.
When you say collapse, you're talking about economic collapse.
Yeah.
Not political. Okay.
Political they may be, because they vote in the people that will give them the most for nothing.
Gotcha.
And I think we could say that about the current administration for sure.
That's very true. Yeah. I got to tell you, Stan, of all the things that are on my what I'm looking at here is really the shoe to drop on the economic in the economic menu. I really think that would have to create some sort of a series of domestic events that would usher in. It would be like a 9/11 on an economic scale. That's what I'm looking at from my personal.
Yep. Look, this year, 2014, I think is when we're going to see the major moves in the world economy toward a doomsday collapse. Globally, it's just yeah.
It almost has to be at this point. I've heard it said, and what's your take on this? That the Illuminists, the ones that have the satanic agenda, they've got a kind of a drop dead date in mind, whether or not it's certainly not for us, the unwashed, to know. It's for them to know. Are we playing against some sort of a drop dead date that they've got in mind, that they want to have all of their plans accomplished and agendas done and everything?
I'm sure they are. And I'm pretty sure with the computers they have in the back room, which will be massive supercomputers, that they have been gathering data and building models, monitoring various resources on the planet and human activity and prices of various commodities and nuclear proliferation, energy. I mean, they probably have a zillion priorities and their parameters that they're using, and with that they can say, well, here's when the real date for oil depletion in the United States and Saudi Arabia and China, Russia, whatever, and this will affect such and such, will affect such and such, which will affect crops. And okay, we've got solar data coming in, they'll say, and well, that means that our time frame has got to be before such and such happens. We're pretty sure this is going to happen on such and such a month or whatever. So they're looking at priorities of things, and they would have prepared themselves as best they can feel for such events. And out of that would come, the date window between such and such a date and such a date. We better have this done, and then the next date that done, and then okay, when the big global collapse comes, well, that's probably going to be sometime this year. It's right, they're going. Only they know, and they're prepared for that and have moved us toward that. And when they've got enough of their chips in place where they're happy they'll have control of the situation, then they'll push the button, and the world economy will go in the toilet, and people will panic, and because it'll hit everybody sitting on the couch watching TV and everybody that's working, and everyone that depends on money of some sort to live will suddenly find they have none, and they've got to deal with what they've got in the cupboard and what they might steal from their neighbors that have more. That's kind of the mentality that's going to happen. So anyway.
That really, to me, right there, that entire paragraph that you just said to me is perhaps, I think is perhaps the most important thing that people should be looking out for. There will be this collapse. There will be, and people are looking for this trigger event. But I think we're already in the process. I think that trigger's already been pulled. We're just waiting for the bullet to strike.
People are expecting a huge, earth-shattering event when there are, daily regional shattering events taking place right before our eyes that are being overlooked in place of that one big event.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's kind of holding their breath. I just don't know why we haven't broken down into civil mayhem at the moment, rushes on food stores and stuff by so many people being, unemployed right now. It's just, you and I, we're eating, but we're certainly not getting rich. And those folks that have no backups out there, they're going to be kind of unruly, putting it mildly.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, I'll tell you, Stan, we covered it once again. I mean, it's so great to check in with you and to kind of see what's going on with you and in terms of what you're looking at.
Oh. Listen, you might put in your what do you call it? Your listening room there. Your
chat room, yes.
Chat room, right. Put in those links I put in there just for fun, something off of the doom and gloom, just to take your mind off of it. I put in some links to high-speed photography, one of the things that I'm interested in, and time-lapse photography, whatever. And you'll see some interesting water drops experiments in slow motion. And there are a lot more on some of the pages I've put in there. You can look at other things other than what I selected, but it shows you an interesting thing when water drops into a puddle, how it ripples out and how the drop comes back up and meets the next drop coming and they collide and all that kind of stuff. And the doggies are enjoying the show. And these things I find rather interesting to watch the videos because you see it, as it progresses slowly, the water drop comes down and makes the ripples go out. And I use a lot of these kind of things to formulate the paper I'm writing on gravity and the nature of the universe. I was trying to get one image up on the show images page tonight, which is I'm having trouble getting the server to accept it for some reason. But anyway, it was showing how galaxies, when you look at galaxies, how they spin and they have these swirling arms, but galaxies don't seem to form like orbits where you have a chunk of stars orbiting around the center galaxy. And you think, well, that's interesting. Okay, so it's spinning and it goes around once every 200 million years. A galaxy spins around. Same density of space there that we're in here around the sun. But when we spin here, we're spinning, maybe 100 million times faster or something than the center of our galaxy. But we're not forming spiral arms.
We're also moving, correct? Aside from the spinning, we're also moving.
We're in one of those spiral arms of the Milky Way. Now, you say, well, okay, that's fine, but why didn't the same rules of physics apply here while the sun, any star, is spinning around within that galaxy? It actually makes discrete orbits where things have to orbit, but you don't see arms, or of dust and stuff. You just see discrete orbits. And then you look down, 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 down at a zillion times smaller. And, when I say a zillion, it's about 3 to the 15th times smaller. But anyway, down at the core of atoms. And you look at the spin there, and what does that do? Well, now that doesn't have like single flat orbits. The core of the atoms are there spinning extremely fast, but they form shells, not flat orbital, planes, around the spin of the atom. They're spinning so much faster than we are, relatively speaking, to the galaxy. They're spinning so much faster in the same density of space that they form curls that make shells, and in those shells are little loops that form, and those are electrons. And that's why electrons there's not many of them in the first shell, but then there's more in the next, and those are because of the spacing of these spirals or these swirls in these shells that keep the energy that's an atom from hitting the next atom in that shell. And it's a function of how fast they spin in this density of space. And so even though the galaxy is bigger than we are by, a lot of times, it's maybe 100 billion times or 100 million times bigger. Anyway, because it's so much bigger, it cannot form discrete orbits, nor can it form shells, because space is too thin for its size, for the galaxy's size. When you get into spinning things in oil or in water, you'll find that you have to spin with a lot more energy in oil to make things happen, orbits form around the spinning rod or waves, than you do in water, because water is less dense. And so that's how I'm looking at the density of space and the spins in it. And anyway, it's something I am putting together for the next paper sometime down the road, if the Lord tarries. But that's why I thought these videos would be of interest to people, is just to see and study how fluids react when they, when energy is put into them in the form of a drop or a spin.
Vibration, sound, it's amazing.
And you'll see things that are on these video sections of I think most of them are on YouTube if you transfer it across, and you'll see things that aren't particularly galaxies or science or physics, but you'll see like hummingbirds in slow motion, seeing how they move their wings at, it takes a 5,000th of a second for me to take a photo of them out here on the deck, get a good still photo while they're flying. But this guy did it with a video and, high-speed video camera. And you can see how they move their wings and articulate the airflow around them and tuck their tail in and stick their tongue out and get their food and come back out. But you can see what your eye can't see normally. You just see them zip up, stick a nose down in the flower, zip, gone away. But this shows you what happens in between, and it is just fascinating to watch. Nothing to do with politics or world economy or anything. It's just, I think Holly's going to put up that video, one of those videos tomorrow. And there's videos on a guy shooting a Glock, a pistol under the water, to show what happens when you shoot a pistol underwater. And the bullet drops down to the ground within about 7 or 8 feet. Underwater it doesn't go very far. And it shows you, the gas bubbles that form, the vortex and all that kind of stuff, and the smoke rings underwater. And another interesting thing, you see. And
so it's not like the movies.
Say again?
It's not like the movies where we see, somebody shooting at somebody in the ocean, who's down 30 feet deep.
Yeah, ain't happening. No. You'll find it. Well, look, in the crime labs, when they're wanting to retrieve a bullet to see if it's one used in the crime out of this gun, they'll shoot it into a water tank, and it's just probably 12, 15 feet long, and they'll go down and collect it. It'll drop to the bottom. The water is so much more dense than air. Another one of those things about density of space and water and how things react. And a bullet going into water won't go very far. Just too much resistance, and so it can't curl up.
Very interesting. And the first time I've ever watched the effects of frequency on droplets of water, I was amazed at the different shapes, and it put a whole new perspective. It gave me a whole new perspective of how creation and our universe can work and what drives it. And now we know they have these non-lethal sound weapons, and they have the gang stalking where they target people electronically, and it can change their moods from happy to depressed to angry, and this all being done by frequencies we can't hear.
I tell you what, let's all make aluminum foil hats and ground them, and we'll be safe.
Well, you're behind the curve on that one, Stan. We've had ours for a couple of years now. We're more than happy to make you one.
Get you up. Dear.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it's always good for a little levity, in these dark times.
You got to take your mind off of it for a little while.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, guys, I guess I've run over again, and
it's always a pleasure.
Questions later.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, you take care. You do sound better than you did last week, which I'm thankful for. And
Holly's doing a good job.
Well, you keep drinking that magic elixir. I'll tell you. Yeah. Sounds great. All right, sir. Well, God bless, and tell everyone there we said hello.
To the third and final hour of this Tuesday, March 18th edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We just got done interviewing our Tuesday guest, Mr. Stan Deyo. His website, standeyo.com. For those of you who missed the interview, go back and listen to the archive, as it was fantastic, as always. We're going to hit a few pieces of news and then take calls for the rest of the show. Speaking of can you handle the truth, can you tell the truth? It has come out now that the NSA surveillance program has reached into the past, retrieving old phone calls, replaying them to listen to their content. This from the Washington Post. The National Security Agency has built a surveillance system capable of recording 100% of a foreign country's telephone calls. As the article states, I would imagine also, I would just say all telephone calls, enabling the agency to rewind conversations as long as a month after they take place, according to people with direct knowledge of the effort and documents supplied by former contractor Edward Snowden. It goes on to explain the mechanisms by which they use to do this, and interestingly enough, there's a graphic It is called Mystic, and it is a picture of a wizard. And this is the cover page for the documents, which explain how they go about doing this. And I have a quick audio clip from, I believe, the Washington Times or Washington Post on this story. Here it is. It's only 48 seconds, and it'll give you a little bit more explanation.
The U.S. National Security Agency has technology enabling it to record all the phone calls of an entire country and replay them later. A report based on leaked documents by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden says the technology functions like a time machine by being able to reach into the past. The Washington Post cited the report uncovering the NSA capability to collect 100% of the calls of a country and reach as far back as 1 month with the tools called Mystic and Retro. The leaked documents say the tools can retrieve audio of interest that was not tasked at the time of the original call. U.S. officials have defended NSA programs, saying they were needed to thwart terrorist attacks, but they failed to present any evidence showing a single such attack having been able to prevent these techniques.
All right. Now, my question is, how many billions of dollars in manpower hours did it take to figure out how to use a recorder? They've been able to record phone calls. They've been able to record audio for decades upon decades, even being able to project it onto small electronic boxes called televisions. It's not really a new technology. It is new to us, the information that the NSA, have been collecting all telephone calls, storing them, and why are they going back and listening to them unless they miss something? From what I understand, they have algorithms that click on certain keywords that allow these people to pick up on conversations that are using these keywords that grab their attention. So are they going back and just listening to anyone for any reason? Either way, it is troubling, and it shows how much privacy we do not have, even though we have that illusion of privacy that the Constitution gives us. There is no privacy. And even if we have privacy from our government, there is no privacy from God. So, is this surprise anybody? I don't think it does. It's just another, point case. If we were going to do this by trial, it's another piece of evidence against the government Gestapo and how it has encroached on the rights of the people and continues to do so. A few pieces on Obamacare, then we will get to phone calls. We have news from Jay Carney's press conference that they have no idea how many people have paid for Obamacare, for their premiums. Yet people are losing money, getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in doctor's bills. There was a story of a man who did enroll, who did pay, who now owes $407,000 in doctor bills, having insurance through Obamacare. But let's hear what Jay Carney has to say about Obamacare, the enrollees, and the premiums they may or may not have paid.
Ed, I can ask you about health care. You started out by saying 5 million people have enrolled. Is that the correct word, enrolled, since we still don't know how many people have actually paid their premiums? Is it 5 million signed up? Will we get the information on who's actually enrolled and paid their premiums?
CMS is working to provide more detailed data on who has already paid their premiums, what percentage of the population of enrollees that includes. We can point you to major insurers who have placed that figure at 80%, give or take, depending on the insurer. But we don't have specific data that is, in a reliable enough form to provide.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, the incompetence to these people, it's like a bunch of children with a billion Legos. They have no idea what to do with them. Only the Legos represent our tax dollars. It took, $1 billion to launch the website that couldn't carry the traffic of half of HomelandSecurityUS.com. They can't figure out or keep track who is paid for their premiums, because you sign up on the website to make an account doesn't mean you have insurance. You have to go ahead and pick a plan and purchase it. How much harder could they make this? And it's not by accident. They're not stupid. This is intentional. It is to make people so aggravated, to get them so angry at the system that's in place, to move towards a single-payer system because it's the only logical way, and then they say it in their own words.
And they've destroyed the 1/6 of our U.S. economy.
Yeah,
by bringing socialism in, and of course taking out the insurance carriers.
I was thinking today, isn't it interesting how they, demonize capitalism here in America and promote socialism? Yet, what are they doing in all of these other countries? They are providing, through the NAFTA and GATT and the TPP and the building up of Asia. They're essentially promoting capitalism across the world while stripping it away from the United States. These people are definitely run by Lucifer, as he is the author of confusion, as the Bible says. And everything these people do, they only convolute these situations even more. It's just shocking. And this poor gentleman from Las Vegas, he went to a hospital believing he had insurance. The Las Vegas man, his name is Larry Bisach, paid the premium on his Nevada HealthLink insurance plan in November. But as far as February 25th came around, it wasn't clear who the company was covering him. The retired civil engineer had a triple bypass on the 3rd of January, and now has a $400,000 plus medical bill. He was interviewed by the Review Journal on the 25th of February, and this is one example of thousands of people who are having major issues, either being cut off of their insurance, being told they don't have insurance when they do, being told they have insurance when they don't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we have Obama today making a statement about Obamacare to immigrants. On Tuesday, President Obama sought to assure illegal immigrants that they can also sign up for Obamacare without worrying that the immigration people will come for their family members who are in the country illegally. In an interview with Univision Deportes, a Spanish-language sports radio show, Obama said immigration officials won't have access to personal information that consumers provide when signing up for health care on the new exchanges. Well, the main thing for people to know is that any information you get, asked with respect to buying insurance, does not have anything to do with the rules of governing immigration. And you can qualify if you're a legal resident if you are legally present in the United States. What's a civil class getting your citizenship by taking a test and learning about America? I guess it's semantics anymore. If you're here, I guess you're an American. So I wonder if he has that attitude when traveling abroad. I'm in Russia. I'm a Russian.
And what don't people understand, the bureaucrats understand about illegal aliens? The word illegal.
Look, that's racist. And illegal is a term, just like jihadist. Did you see the banning of the word jihad?
I saw some reference to that. Where is this banned or yeah?
I saw no authenticating documents.
Okay.
It was on many well-respected alternative news sources.
Okay, I had seen a passing reference to that, and I was wondering if, in fact, that this was a banning within the documentation used, the literary lexicon used by the United States, by various offices of the United States. I have not been able to verify that. I haven't had the time to do that, but this would go right along with everything else that we're seeing. And again, you're looking at the criminalization of free speech, criminalization of Christianity, criminalization of the moral standings, whether you're for, whether you're anti-abortion and pro-Second Amendment. There's a war. There's a war taking place, and folks, we're dead smack in the middle of this war. End of story.
Yes, we are. I believe I have one more clip here to end our Obamacare news, and we're going to go right to the phones after that. Here's Ed Schultz on what Obamacare has done. It's only 50 seconds. You're going to like it.
Here's the bottom line, again, for the Democrats, and I don't think it was a perfect campaign. She is a very qualified Democrat, no question about it. She'd make a great congressional member. But she ran on fixing Obamacare. Democrats, let this be a lesson. You don't have to fix anything. The numbers are on your side. You're saving lives. You're saving money. John Boehner wants to hold another vote in the House that's going to take money away from Americans. Is that hard to say? No, but you got to have some intestinal fortitude to say it. So any Democrat that runs ads and goes out there and plays into the negative narrative that, well, I'm going to go to Washington and fix Obamacare. Is that the first thing you're going to say in your ad, Democrats? No. We're on the right side of history. We're saving money. We're putting money in people's pockets. We're saving lives. We are headed in the right direction.
There you go, Ed Schultz. Way to just completely take a coherent thought and run it right off the deep end of a cliff. Anyway, they're not saving lives. The story I just read to you about a man owing $400,000 being covered by Obamacare is not saving money. The only thing they're doing, or the only money they're saving, is for the insurance companies that they are bailing out due to the lack of enrollees of Obamacare. And with that, we will end our talk of Obamacare for the night, thankfully, and go to the phones. But first, we're going to give our guest list for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we will be joined by Doc Marquis.
It's a must-listen to tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's going to be a two-parter. One part before the conference in Florida, which he is a speaker of, and then the second part will be afterwards, where he'll be able to go over much of his 3-hour presentation he's put together, not wanting to really give it away too much before he gives it in Florida. And then Thursday, a very special show with Tom Horn and Steve Quayle. It's going to be a great show, as always, when those two get together. Steve's new book,
Xenogenesis. I got to tell you, I really think it could be. It plugs the holes from Angel Wars, really from Genesis 6 Giants, True Legends, and Angel Wars. This kind of is the icing on that cake of books, Xenogenesis, and I'm very humbled to have several pages dedicated to my report.
That's not why you're singing such high praises of the book.
No, not at all.
No,
seriously.
I'm kidding. I know Steve's a great author, and I'm looking forward to reading that book.
Actually, there are a lot of questions I had that were answered by this book with respect to some of the technical transhumanistic elements here, because transhumanism is really far down the road. People don't understand how far down we are with transhumanism. So this is a big deal. This is a good book.
Transhumanism, Beast Tech, RFID technology, the mark of the beast, the controlling mechanisms of the future. And then Friday, we will be joined by Augusto Perez, and with him might be Brother Marcus, which I do need to call and confirm either way, so I can give you guys a for sure tomorrow, and I will do that. But Augusto Perez for sure on Friday. Another not miss. You're not going to want to miss the show, as he has more information continuing from the last appearance, talking about what he saw happening in Puerto Rico, or what man he deals with that down there has seen in a vision, and some other very interesting, timely things that are happening with Israel and the war stuff going on. And when I talked with him the other day, he had a lot to say. We talked for at least a half hour, and going to be an exciting show. Such a blessing being able to have these people on the show and just sit back and listen to them explain the things that they're revealed to them. But anyway, Doc Marquis Wednesday, Tom Horn, Steve Quayle Thursday, Augusto Perez Friday. Great lineup. Now let's go to the phones. And we're going to go to area code 262 first. Looks like you've been on hold the longest. Thanks for your patience. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah, you guys everybody's talking about this plane missing and Crimea, and everybody's all up in arms and confused. And I'll tell you, it's all pretty much, to me, related. And this whole mystery about the plane crashing, either it's the angry leprechauns or the Martians or the midget in Motown, it's a hijacking, it's a 10-year-old shoe bomb. Look, what I think you're looking at, what you're seeing, is continuity of government in action. And the reason why I say this is simply because of the fact that things that have been tracked, that all these leaders of the nations know, all these space agencies know, we're getting into it, and it can be verified by not only the Doppler pings of re-entering objects into the Earth's atmosphere, but the fireballs that can be seen up and down the East Coast at increasing frequency, and the tracking of 4, specifically one comet, which we are entering into the debris field of, and will sustain an initial period of contact with that debris field for 3 months, sustained or followed by 5 months through the densest portion, with the most harrowing part in that densest portion taking approximately 30 hours. Now, the reason why this would be tied into the Crimea is because the path of this object apparently seems to dive down above the Earth. And that debris will spread between, voila, Russia over the pole, Canada, and down through Mexico, as these recent fireballs have been seen in these areas. So if you have a conflict, who's going to know the difference between something that ends up smacking into the planet and a tactical nuke? Not many people are going to know, and if something of significant size hits and does some disruptive damage, well, people aren't going to know the difference, and it will be easy to conflagrate the two. Now, the RAND Corp has a policy of stating that if there was anything significant to come, re-enter orbit, something like an asteroid or something like that, that they wouldn't tell anybody because they wouldn't want to disrupt society. But however, NASA and JPL, though they've been tracking and fudging the numbers, it's pretty clear from their charts and graphs of projected orbital interception that we're going to start to go through this. And it's even biblically stated. You can ask Steve Quayle, ask some other guys about the Feast of Trumpets, the hailstones from God, the angels throwing down the incense from heaven, all that sort of thing. And so all this stuff that's going on is, you would have to say, and if you know anything about, Satan's minions, the Illuminati, what have you, they watch this stuff. So much of what they do is based upon oncoming, incoming events. And it's no secret this stuff is out there. It's only secret to people that don't know. And this flight that's missing, tied into this, if you were expecting an event, either both of astral nature and of a nuclear war nature, which we seem to be inching closer towards, well, in either event, and if one was to be timed and one was to occur, what you would want to do is you would want to take those who would be most instrumental in preserving knowledge, technical knowledge, and rebuilding a technical society, of which it's been said that many, or at least several persons who were passengers, were of the highest technical ability. Some of the best tech minds. Some worked on secret military projects. Some worked on a lot of these communications and internet technical stuff. They were very proficient in their field. And so, given the space of time of what's being tracked, and given the protocol of continuity of government giving them a 30-day notice, what better way to hide away these persons than to take the plane that they're on? Now, we know that the government since 9/11, and George Bush has admitted this in clips, has a program to where they can remotely fly planes under guise of preventing another 9/11. However, the 777 Boeing, one of the newest models, most likely under the Telecommunications Act, has various backdoors hidden, everything from navigation to ringing the stewardess, most likely. And I wouldn't be too surprised, given the increased surveillance state and the revelations of such, that whole entire plane was wired with cameras. Now, it's been said that it ascended to 45,000 feet twice and then descended. And flying at that height would not only depressurize the cabin, but it would render the passengers inert, immobile. It would knock them out. A sustained flight would kill them because they would die from asphyxiation, hypoxia, because the air mass that drop down don't have enough oxygen supply to sustain them. However, because it descended, it says to me, at least, that the intent was not to kill the passengers, but to render them inert. In other words, immobilize them. And the only reason I can see for being done is because you want to preserve those people who were deemed important. As well, in a few days after the crash, the Air Force came out all of a sudden with this flight path, Air Force, military, whoever, and put it in the Indian Ocean. Well, the only place in the Indian Ocean where that plane could actually go, if it was to actually land there, would be Diego Garcia. And if we know anything about that, it's a man-made island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and some knowledge has been leaked, that there's a subterranean facility underneath that man-made island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, which would make it a possible landing spot. Now, being compartmentalized, those on base would either not be told or be told not to say. And if there's a subterranean facility, as has been somewhat revealed, it may very well be there. And if not there, possibly at another facility. And it's interesting to note that in the same press conference when Jay Carney, that you both, was asked about the health care plan, he was also asked by an Asian press agent about the plane possibly having landed at Diego Garcia. And if you watch the look on his face and his very curt, very short no answer, he was somewhat panicked and concerned that someone would go that route and ask him that. So, given all these things, at least that I've been keeping track of, it tells me that, just like in that movie 2012, where all the people started getting their golden tickets and getting flown out to the little base in China, wherever, the plans for continuity of government, this is what it looks like. And while you have all these issues coming together to lead people to panic and disarray and all these different theories and such coming out, no, it's not as sexy as it's in the mothership with the cookie somewhere, but it's more mundane but still a little sexy that this is continuity of government. This is what it looks like. They're preparing for big things, not just things that they're going to trigger here on Earth, but things that they have been watching, tracking, monitored, and can be expected, even biblically expected. And that's pretty much my take on that.
Wow. Well, you certainly ran the gambit of topics, to be certain. Let's just touch on the most recent one, the plane. Where is it, and why is it where it is, based on your research?
Well, as I said, continuity of government. It could be.
No, I get that. Is there a specific objective or plan for this plane, I guess?
The objective or plan for it?
Right.
Well, there's no plane. It's the passengers. As I stated, it's been said and revealed that there were several, I think 14, maybe a little bit more, several of some of the top minds in the tech industry on that plane. And if you were anticipating an event, and as well anticipating the movement trigger of events here on Earth, which would result in the need to have some of the best technical minds you have preserved in order to rebuild things at a later date and preserve that knowledge, well then what better chance would you have to basically gather them all up? I mean, you can't just snatch them off the street. People would ask questions. But if a plane goes down, look conjecture.
Wait a minute, they're asking a heck of a lot of questions now. I mean,
easier to explain something off the runway than the sky, I guess. But yeah,
from the standpoint of everything else and things that are seemingly unrelated and things that are known and as I said, what's being tracked by NASA JPL, these are things that can significantly disturb your day, okay? And given that, yes, you have economic malfeasance, you have the oncoming collapse, but all of these things between economic collapse and wars, they are all meant to distract you from looking up. Because again, and you guys quote scripture a lot too, and the bad guys are spiritual. You know, they know what's in the Bible is real. They hope most people don't know, but they know it's real. And so you talk about the angels throwing down the incense on earth, God's hailstones, the Feast of Trumpets, all that stuff. They're expecting that. And that is something which is beyond their control and relatively off most people's radar. If you recall last week, NASA all of a sudden put up a story on Yahoo News about wanting all the amateur astronomers to get out their telescopes and look for the nearest asteroid Earth object. That same day, they discovered a comet or a very large body just passing by the Earth. Now, that was another in a series of these large bodies. And as I said before, you've had numerous reports over the last few weeks of fireballs up and down the East Coast, from the West Coast into the Louisiana line, over Canada, because we're starting to get into passing through the debris field of this oncoming comet.
I've heard some other people talk about that. And caller, we appreciate you calling in and sharing that information. We're going to have to let you go. We got a few other callers to get to, but thank you. Probably one of the most comprehensive stories I've heard on the missing plane since it went missing.
Okay. Have a good one.
Sir. Have a good one. Thanks. All right. Moving along here. And it is so hard when we have such great callers to have to manage them with so little time, but got to do what we got to do. We got 10 minutes left, and we are at area code 978. You are live with the Hagmann and Hagmann report.
Good evening, Doug and Joe. Nancy from Boston. I wanted to ask if you had heard or had any input to a story that I caught right before I tuned in and really didn't have a chance to follow up on, which was that PBS announced the other night that Snowden was related to Rand and Ron Paul.
I did not see that, and just to give you a quick personal opinion of what I think of Snowden is he is just a face for an excuse of information release. Don't believe he could get out of his job with that information for a second, not with the standard operating procedures and layers of security they have, but he is the face of the NSA disclosure.
Okay. On the other hand, I am aware of what. Excuse me. I am aware of what you're referring to. I would doubt. At this point, I have not seen anything to verify the authenticity of what you're referring to.
Yes. Yeah. Myself as well. Like I said, I really didn't have a lot of time to research it, and you guys are in the know a lot of times, so I just thought that see if I could get your feedback on it. Yeah.
We know Obama's related to Dick Cheney, so.
Well, they're all related. We've learned that most, if not all, the U.S. presidents are blood related, and it ties back to the Windsors, the royal throne, and also I have looked into it to find that the lineage ties back to Charlemagne, which is, I think, King Charles I of Germania, who was also the first Roman emperor. So,
you know what, caller, you make a very good point. If you trace the lineage of the people in power, the presidents, the Western or United States presidents, as well as the royalty in the UK, you'll find overlap, and it's extremely important, especially when we're talking about the end times.
Yes, it is. You know, I've called in before. I think, you know, in December, shortly before the Christmas holiday. You know, emphasizing it's, you know, the Bible is a book of genetics, and this is, you know, the story unravels. It's all about genetics. I'm a strong believer in the two bloodlines. You know,
I remember your call. I remember specifically your call, and you're right on the money with respect to the genetic aspect, the DNA, the bloodlines, and this being part of the deception. And you know what? People just don't seem to get that, do they?
Well, you know, we have been taught so differently, and what's in the Bible, and you know, but if the truth is there for people with eyes to see, and it's you know, something I woke up to several years ago, and you know, people, I witness it, and people look at me like I have 3 heads. They don't want to.
Exactly.
They don't want to believe it, and you know, I remember this story coming out several years ago about the 12-year-old girl that tied in the lineages. She liked doing family trees. George W. Bush was in office at the time, and she decided to do his lineage, and in doing that, started to know other presidential lineages and, you know, the elite, and tied it back to the British royal throne. And, you know, as adults in the movement, did further investigation based on that and tied it all back to Charlemagne based on documented history, which is pretty significant when you realize the Vatican whole role in this, and that it would be the first Roman emperor, you know, King Charlemagne, to tie it back, which, if you want to go further, goes back to the Canaanites, you know, the line of Cain, which, you know, I will comment to people that particularly say that they don't believe in God or you know, the Bible because, you know, why he's a God of murder. Why did he have his people, you know, order his people to kill? Well, you know, why did he send them into the desert to kill the Canaanites? You know, specifically he was trying to protect his people from a lineage that had corrupted his DNA of his children. You know, and it does sound astounding. It did to me. I kept doing investigation and work on it and studies on it myself because it sounded so crazy that I just had to I had to prove it wrong. But every corner I turned, I found something else significant to tie it in. And so, you know, the announcement on PBS the other night really blew my mind to find that out. Because intuitively I believe it. And I believe that when I look into it, I'm going to find out that it can be proven.
Read Matthew chapter 13 if you have not, and that will explain exactly what you were talking about. And sadly, those who refuse to, or those who just take stories without the context or understanding of the whole story is something they do to use to say, oh, how can you, believe and serve in a God who commits genocide? And it's a lack of understanding of Christians of how and why things happen the way they did that people can't explain themselves and explain through the biblical words themselves what was going on.
Exactly. It can be all proved in the Bible. And, you know, a lot of times you go into the churches and they dash around the Bible with verses, but it's a story that needs to be read from front to cover and looked at it in its whole perspective. You know, but that really blew my mind that PBS came out and said that, because the devil does reveal his plans. And if you don't believe it, you know, and don't follow up on it, you're going to be hoodwinked.
Yeah, it says we should not be ignorant of the devil's devices, and we should not. But first and foremost, we should not be ignorant of the Lord and his ways, as only understanding the devil's ways will get us nowhere if we don't understand the Lord. We thank you so much for the call. We are within 2 minutes left of the show, and God bless you, and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Well, another show going by so fast, and Stan was great tonight, and the few callers we did get were very interesting and had some good takes on things. And to the last caller, as I said, read Matthew chapter 13. It's the parable of the wheats and the tares, the parable of the sowers, of the good seeds and the bad seeds. And
I didn't want to interrupt that last caller. Steve's book, Xenogenesis, gets into the DNA, gets into the transhumanism, and that's why I'm kind of interested with what Tom Horn has got to say, and both Steve and Tom Horn, a roundtable discussion of this, the DNA, the harmonics, all of this, and of course it goes back to Tubal Cain and the Cain lineage, and is very, very important. So, yeah, you're right.
All right. With that, we are going to sign off. Tomorrow, Marquis will be with us for the whole 3 hours. And I know one thing we're going to be discussing are the 10 plagues of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a reason, and we'll get into that tomorrow.
I got to tell you something. I am not familiar with how that plays out, or to be more clear, I'm not familiar with the 10 plagues as they relate in the Bible, or how that's interrelated.
Reading the Bible at first for me, starting to read it from the beginning, when I did start to read it, it was kind of hard to understand. There's a lot of great movies that if you watch them, not that you take what they show in the movies and believe it, but then you go back and read the Bible, it kind of clears things up a little bit, but it's always the prayer and that time with the Lord that you spend that will give you the answers you need. With that, we're going to sign off for the evening. God bless each and every one of you. Stay safe until tomorrow. We'll see you back here at 8 p.m.